August 2018, a suburban home in Frederick, Colorado, a smiling family in Facebook photos, a pregnant mother who sold health products from home, two little girls who loved dress up and bedtime stories. Then one ordinary Monday, Shanann Watts and her daughters, Bella and Celeste, vanished. The world watched as a missing persons case became a national obsession, but the story that followed would twist into something darker, colder, and far more disturbing than anyone expected. What followed wasn't the chaotic crime spree of a stranger. It was the slow unraveling of the man who had been the family's center, Christopher Watts, the quiet father who'd given interviews on TV and called himself a devoted husband, became the focus of investigators, friends, and millions of viewers across the country. At first, he told a story of confusion and fear, but in the end, he told another story entirely. A confession that ripped off the mask and left the tragic truth exposed. The interrogation that produced the confession wasn't a single dramatic moment on camera. It was a series of interviews, setbacks, and inconsistencies, and a polygraph that he failed. The polygraph itself didn't convict him in court, but it changed everything. Detectives had evidence that Watts wasn't being truthful, and the pressure built hours of questions, hours of silence. Then gradually the facade cracked. Here's how investigators say it happened. At first, Chris maintained innocence. He told friends in the media that his wife and children had disappeared. He even appeared on television, speaking plainly about the pain of not knowing, but back at the station, to sworn investigators, his story diverged word by word. The polygraph taken on August 15th indicated deception. Facing mounting evidence and inconsistencies, Watts began to talk, first to his father, then to detectives. That's when the confession emerged. What he told them was brutal and precise. He admitted to strangling Shanann in their home. He admitted later to killing his daughters. He described intimate, horrific details, where he had taken them, how he had hidden the bodies, the cold logistics of disposing of the children in oil tanks at an Anadarko facility where he had worked, and burying Shanann in a shallow grave near a well site. For many listeners, the cadence of his voice in the recorded interviews, calm, almost rehearsed, deepened the shock. But confessions don't land in a vacuum. They arrive inside a landscape of motive, opportunity, and secrets. Investigators pieced together Watts' life leading up to that August morning: financial stress, a rocky marriage, and, crucially, an affair. That relationship with a co-worker, Nickel Kessinger, emerged as a central thread. Prosecutors would later say Watts wanted a life without his family, a life with someone else, and that planning and intention were part of the crime. On November 6, 2018, Christopher Watts pleaded guilty to multiple counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and tampering with human remains. He accepted a plea deal that removed the death penalty from consideration. On November 19th, the judge sentenced him to 5 consecutive life sentences, plus additional years for the other charges. The courtroom was silent in many ways, but the echoes of loss were everywhere. Families who once trusted him now called him monstrous. The legal system had given a finality that media storms could not. For Shanann's family, and everyone who loved Bella and Celeste, the confession answered the most painful question. What happened that day? But it offered no solace. It forced people to confront how a smiling Facebook life could hide a fracture so deep. It raised hard questions about warning signs, the limits of what neighbors and friends can see, and whether the system or the people around someone might have missed something critical. And yet the confession itself became subject to debate. Some analyzed the recorded interviews, the pauses, the choice of words, the admissions that seemed rehearsed or defensive. Others scoured new documents, polygraph results, investigators' notes, and the detailed transcripts released to the public. In those documents, Watts sometimes altered his narrative, blaming Shanann for the deaths in early statements, then later acknowledging responsibility. Those flips became part of the investigative mosaic that prosecutors used to argue intent and premeditation. Years later, more revelations trickled out. Letters and interviews from Watts hinted at planning. At an attempt to control the narrative even from behind bars, he described giving Shanann drugs and expressed twisted rationalizations about ending the pregnancy and his family life. Whether these were attempts at explanation, manipulation, or confession, they only deepened the horror for those grieving. For the public, it added layers to an already bleak portrait. A man who had crafted a lie, then admitted to the truth, then tried to rewrite the motive in the aftermath. This episode in our series focuses on the confession, because confessions are where criminal stories often pivot, where private acts collide with public accountability. But remember, behind every forensic detail, every transcript line, and every courtroom photograph, there are real lives. Shanann, who posted about pregnancy and family plans. Bella, who loved playing with dolls. Celeste, who learned to giggle at the world. Their names matter. Their lives matter. And in those names, we find the reason we tell this story. Not to revel in the grisly, but to insist the victims remain human, not headlines.